That was long ago, though. They're all dead now. Jory, old Sir Roderick, Lord Eddard, Harwin and Holin, Cain and Desmond and Fat Tom, Alan with his dreams of knighthood, Micken who had given him his first real sword, even old Nan like as not, and Robb. Robb, who had been more of a brother to Theon than any son born of Balon Greyjoy's loins. Murdered at the Red Wedding, butchered by the Freys. I should have been with him. Where was I? I should have died with him. Prince of Fools, Theon Turncloak, Reek. Behind these names lies the beating heart of a song of ice and fire. A young man at the crossroads of arrogance and shame, he is one of the most human characters seen throughout this story. He is no glorious knight nor wise king, but he is the hero the story needs, the light that will shine through the long night. While he was once one of the most hateable characters in the story, his quest for identity and self-actualization puts him up there as one of the best written characters in the series. Like many characters in the series, Theon felt out of place in his early life. Among the Ironborn, he was seen as small and weak, being beaten by his older brothers. After the failed rebellion, his brothers were killed and Theon was kept as a hostage in Winterfell. Though he would form positive relationships with Robb and Ned Stark, he would never feel like they were truly his family. His life would hinge on the decisions of his father far away, adding a sense of fear to every moment he spent with the Starks. He accompanies Robb in the war, becoming a trusted advisor and asset to the army. Robb sends him back to Pike to negotiate an alliance with Balon Greyjoy. His whole life, Theon has been waiting for the moment he would return to Pike as the Ironborn Prince. He told himself that here he would find his place, here he would have the respect he deserved. But he would be rejected and humiliated by his family, once again finding no home in his homeland. At this point he feels utterly hopeless, having nothing and nobody to identify with. In desperation, he agrees to help with the invasion of the North, betraying the Starks in the process. While he is desperate to prove himself, he is given a small position and is only assigned to raid some seaside villages. Feeling humiliated once again by this trivial-seeming task, he makes a new plan to capture Winterfell. While he miraculously took the castle, he was racked with guilt for the short period he had it. He slept in the same bed as the man who had been a father to him, and people he knew as a child were put to the sword. And this once again would fail him to earn any respect from his family. Ironborn men are mysteriously killed during his control of the castle, and the Stark boys escape. In his solitude, he looks towards the closest things he had to brothers, Jon and Robb, and wonders why he betrayed them for a family that would never appreciate him. But his achievement doesn't last long, as the man in the dungeon known as Reek turns out to be Ramsay Bolton, bringing the army back to take the castle. I am a Greyjoy of Pike. The cloak my father swaddled me in bore a kraken, not a direwolf. For 10 years you have been a ward of Stark. Hostage and prisoner, I call it. Then perhaps Lord Eddard should have kept you chained to a dungeon wall. Instead he raised you among his own sons, the sweet boys you have butchered, and to my undying shame I trained you in the arts of war. Would that I had thrust a sword through your belly, instead of placing one in your hand. As we watch the rest of this story play out in Westeros, Theon is nowhere to be seen for 2 books. We are only left to assume that he was killed by Ramsay to put an end to his pathetic quest for love. And this would have been a fitting end for his character. This story is no fairy tale, and even though Theon has his own sob story, it once again shows that tactical knowledge and strength aren't enough in the cruel and unforgiving world of Westeros. But it wouldn't have been a song of ice and fire if a character could get off the hook that easily. There are no words to describe Theon's torture other than horrifying. We find him a broken husk of a person, completely unrecognizable from the confident and bold boy we used to know. He loses everything he used to identify with in Ramsay's effort to take the last thing he had left, his identity. He loses his fingers so he can no longer use a bow. He's castrated so he can no longer be heir to the Iron Islands, and he has his smile shattered out of hatred. Him? Can it be? Stark's ward, smiling, always smiling. He smiles less often now. I may have broken some of his pretty white teeth. You would have done better to slit his throat. A dog who turns against his master is fit for naught but skinning. There's a certain level of revenge in Ramsay's torture of Theon. Ramsay, born a bastard of an unremarkable woman, was always denied the status that would come with his name. It was only later in life that he could change his name and be one of the most powerful men in the North. Theon, however, took his status for granted his whole life before it was ripped away from him at his lowest. Ramsay, in jealousy and revenge, sought to take away everything Theon had, his identity and his name, to push him past his breaking point. He has no place to call home, no family to save him, and he gives up his name in humiliation. Completely lost in the world, he has nothing to do other than to wander the castle of the family he betrayed, a constant symbol of his betrayal and failure. The worst of his torture is left to the imagination, but it was enough to bring him from the Prince of the Ironborn to a disgusting dog who can feel nothing but aimlessness and emptiness. But something changed when Jane Poole was brought back to Winterfell, under the name of Arya Stark. She, too, was taken from her home, being brought to King's Landing before the violence broke out, leaving her under the control of Littlefinger. She would be forced to work in his brothels before being sent to marry Ramsay Bolton, under the name of Arya Stark. Scared and helpless, she begs Theon to help her escape her fate. Defeated and depressed, Theon tells her there's nothing she can do other than try to stay on his good side. Ramsay would further humiliate them at the bedding ceremony and crush them both down into their fake roles. I have no way to save her, he thought, but I could kill her easy enough. No one would expect it. I could beg her for the honor of a dance and cut her throat. That would be a kindness, wouldn't it? And if the old gods hear my prayer, Ramsay in his wrath might strike me dead as well. Theon was not afraid to die. Underneath the Dreadfort, he had learned that there were far worse things than death. Ramsay had taught him that lesson, finger by finger and toe by toe, and it was not one that he was ever like to forget. With nothing left to live for, Theon hopes that Stannis' victory will be swift, and he'll be put to death along with the rest of the castle. And he hopes that Jane could be killed too, so she would be put out of her misery. But something changed when he met her again. He knew just from looking into her eyes that she was Jane Poole, and not Arya like they'd been told. For just a moment, there was something familiar to him, something that reminded him of home. And when he wandered aimlessly through the Godswood, he would hear Bran's voice calling to him from the Weirwood. At the same time, Mance Rayder and his wildlings would invade the castle, using disguises to try and free fake Arya and bring her to the wall. Reluctantly, he agrees to help them save fake Arya from Ramsay. Reek, who at this point had only wished for death, finds some fraction of his past self in Jane, deciding to free them both from Ramsay and to call himself Theon again. But when they find her in her room, she thinks it's a trap set up by Ramsay to punish her for escaping. When they try to escape, guards catch up to them as they near the wall. They lose the rope, and the two of them are trapped with nowhere to run. Theon, knowing that being captured would be worse than death, leaps off the wall with Jane in his arms. The two of them, without a name or a home, have nothing they hope can save them but death. And in their leap of faith, they choose to die rather than give Ramsay his satisfaction. But because of a miracle, they managed to survive in the snow and escape the castle. While they had lost everything through no fault of their own, they managed to find a part of their old lives in each other, and a better option than death. Theon, after seeing the worst the world has to offer, manages to crawl out of his suffering with broken fingers, and cling to the faint hope that shines in the darkness. Once one of the most hateable characters in the story, he managed to redeem himself, despite being pushed past his breaking point. In a story with tragedy at every corner, Theon Greyjoy is a reminder that even at our worst, we are never too far gone, and there is always human hope inside of us.